in the first game we're looking at is between Vitalis Sapsis with the white pieces versus Evgeny Agrest, Grandmaster, with the black pieces. This game took place in 1990, and we see Bishop F4, my white, C6, C4, and D6. And remember, black wants to establish E5 with this plan of D6. So knight C3, knight F6, knight F3, G6, queen B3, bishop G7, E3, castles, H3, queen E8. All right, wanting to play E5. You know, after a little more preparation, bishop E2, knight BD7, and of course now E5 is on the menu. So bishop H2, king H8. All right, getting off of that diagonal that the queen is on, and then now queen A3, queen A3. All right, throwing a little monkey wrench in the plan here. All right, because of this pawn will become weak after E5. All right, and that's no good. If white just castled here, then E5, queen A3, and then black would have time to defend the D6 pawn. You know, play could continue, knight takes, F takes, knight D2, and then black would be A-okay. But after queen A3 here, black cannot get in his planned E5 event, so he plays knight E4, knight D2, knight F6, and then white started attacking on the king side with G4. All right, queen F7, castles queen side, bishop E6, king B1, A6, and now C5. D takes, bishop D5, H4. So we can see there's just a race, right? Opposite wing castling, but seems like white's attack is a little faster. King A1, A4, G5, fixing the white king side pawns, and queen E6 here. Knight E5 is suggested by Lubomir here. So knight E5, he gives H5, and G takes, bishop takes, and queen F5. However, queen E6 was played, and then just H5, and we can see who has the faster attack here. H takes G6, rook H4, rook FD8, and this game was a long battle that eventually white went on to win here. We see Victor Korchnoi playing the bishop F4 line against Mark Santo Roman. And after knight F6, E3, D6, this time knight C3, C6, knight F3, and now you see queen A5, queen D2, knight BD7, and now again black is prepared to play the move E4. And Korchnoi plays this nice tactic here, knight E4, ready to go into this queenless middle game. Now knight E4. Notice black still cannot get the E5 pushing. Not yet. And knight F6. And the game is pretty much equal here, but again, this is just to illustrate the difficulty of getting, you know, the E5 push in with the bishop on F4. Game continued. F5, bishop E2, and H5. Analysis by Shipkov. He likes castling better. Again, the positions is just up for grabs. It's equal position. Black has more space in the center. So G1, rook G8, F3, G4, H takes, F takes G4. Pieces come off the board, and again we have like a equal position here. So in our next game in this line, we have Vladislav Vorotnikov with the white pieces versus Grandmaster Igor Glek with the black pieces. Again, bishop f4, knight f6, e3, d6, and we're already familiar with the ideas here. Knight c3 and g6 was played. So one thing I would like to mention is you'll see a lot of transpositions. You know, a lot of not transpositions per se, but a lot of mixtures. Sometimes you'll see more than one plan combined, right? So for instance, you see bishop f4, but you also see the knight on c3 in front of the c pawn for white. So here we have this Leningrad setup from Glek. h4, like I said, it's very provocative when you play g6 and h6. Again with the idea of h5, g5. Tiomkin in his analysis says it's not necessary. It says bishop g7 with the idea of h5, knight takes, rook takes, queen takes h5, and king f8. And I've played this line before. You have to be, you know, you have to play very accurate. Again, it depends a lot on your personal style. So he's right. It's not necessary to play the move h6, but again, if you don't want to go in this position, yeah, you're up the exchange, but you have no development, you know, and your king is kind of walking around, so it's easy to, you know, go wrong, especially if you're just under attack for a long amount of time. So I've played both moves. I've played h6 and bishop g7 and allowed the exchange sacrifice. So anyway, bishop d3, of course, with the idea of e4. Another option is bishop c4, bishop d3, knight c6. All right, and this is against the e4 move, as you can see, because of e4. Then the knight, you know, this knight takes on d4, knight f3, knight g4, d5, knight c5, bishop takes, and so there's a way to get in e5, albeit a bit artificial, in artificial sense, right? If he took with the knight takes, d takes, h5, very strong, and g4, opening up the oops, sorry about that, people, which would open up the square after the capture. So bishop takes, d takes, and now e4. All right, and notes from Tiomkin. Now the black pawns in the center become vulnerable, right? E3, E4, and H4, H5 break pawn structure on king side, but black finds a way to get the initiative. All right, E6, bishop B5 check, bishop D7, D takes, bishop takes, knight takes, C6, and again we're in this endgame. Knight C3, F4, D1, rook H7. All right. And black is slightly better in the ending because of space advantage, and his bishop is better than the knight on c3. I must agree. A few more moves, and so you can see that black has chances. It's up for grabs. If you're playing white, bishop f4 is definitely a viable system, right? It's hard for black to get in e5, double edge game. So it's not like you're just playing an unsound system. It's easy to remember, easy to play. The ideas are easy for white to follow. And unfortunately, in this game for black, after playing so well, he wind up going astray and losing the game. This is equal position, but he plays rook f5 here. G5. And now there's some pressure on the position here. So now the bishop is passive on f8, king c3. This is going to lose the pawn on f3. That's a blunder. Maybe he was in time pressure. There's no way to defend that pawn now. So bishop c5. Okay, and the problem is what about the h pawn? F pawn drops. And now the h pawn drops. Okay, so here black is going to avoid the concept of trying to get into e5 by playing the move e6. This game is from 1999 from Svetlana Medvedeva with the white pieces and Mikhail Kobalya with the black pieces. Sorry for that mispronunciation. So after e6 here instead of d6, bishop e2 was played, and black just played b6. Bishop f3. Alright. d5, c4, bishop e7, knight c3, and black castles. C takes d5. And now knight takes d5, knight takes, e takes, and now bishop c7. So that shows the fact that this move is available, and white is already better here. So that means that this was a blunder, this castle earlier. So that means c6 had to be played, or bishop b7, something to protect d5. So just keep that in mind. But keep an eye out for that tactic. So after this simple castling, c takes, knight takes, e takes, and bishop c7 works because of the bishop being on this diagonal. Remember, let's mark it out real quick. Have the king here, rook here, and then you have the bishop, bishop right there on f3. So that's the idea. If the queen captures on c7, the queen is no longer defending the d5 square, and then just bishop takes d5 check. King has to move, and then the rook drops in the corner. So right here, white is already, for all intents and purposes, winning the game strategically. Queen d7, a3. To me, that's a waste of move. You got a full tempo. Out of all moves, to do a3, just to avoid the check. This wasn't the time for white to go passive. Here you see queen b3 piling up the pressure, and notice how queen b3 not only develops, it develops with a threat, and it stops bishop b4. Bishop b7, bishop e5, rook d8, and this is just sample variation here, but again, not a3. Bishop b7 is played, rook a takes b8. Some lazy moves by black here. By white. Let's black in the game. g5, rook bd8, rook c1, bishop d6. And of course, we already know what's coming. And the stonewall is f5 break, f5, f4 break, knight c3, bishop b8, castles, rook f6, rook e1. And of course, white is also preparing the e4 break, if you can get it in. f4, e takes, g takes, rook c2, queen f7, Rook c e2, bishop d6, queen a4, bishop f8, rook e8, and just simply f takes g3. So rook e8 is a mistake. F takes a g3, f takes g3, and now just bishop c6. Very strong move. So you're just gonna lose material. d8, d6. Again, more tactics, but this time the tactics are in white's favor. Just simply queen f6, threatening the pawn on d4 and the rook on d8. Rook c8, queen takes d4 check, and the game is pretty much over for all intents and purposes. So white was better. White resigned here after rook c e4. After that move, just simply queen f3. Show you the line real quick. Rook c4, just queen f3 here. King h3. And you know the game's gonna end shortly. So that was a debacle by white, but just note the idea from black's perspective with e6 is not to necessarily play for e5. It's just to get the dark square bishop out. E7, as you see here. And also note that the castle was a blunder, so c6 would have prevented that, or bishop b7. Remember, I was saying that sometimes you'll see a combination of plans. Here after bishop f4, knight f6. In the game Matvieva versus Duma Trashi from 1995, you'll see knight f6, e3 is e6, like we discussed in the last game, bishop e2, but now you see the move d6. All right, it's like flexible, and it blunts the diagonal of the bishop on f4. c4 was played, bishop e7, knight c3, castle. All right, so black, is equal here. Queen c2, knight c6, castle queen side. Queen e8, knight f3, a6, h3, and b5, and we see the attack on the queen side. All right, opposite wings attacked often revolve around who has the initiative, who can get the attack in first, and here is black who strikes first. g4, b4, knight b1, now knight e4. If you can't see what's going on here, so there's a threat. So rook h f1, b3, nice sacrifice, opening up the b file for black. All right, again, the opposite wing attacks, more important is the initiative than material. Queen takes, rook b8, queen a3, and now there it is, e5. White walked right into that tactical shot right there, but e5. And again, remember how it's talking about the, always think of combination of plans. You can, many times you'll be able to mix plans together. So early on, you just want to get the bishop out to e7, so you played d6. I'm sorry, you played e6, but later on you played d6, and then at the right time you exploited the position of the bishop e5. So bishop h2, of course, white can't afford to take. F takes g4, h takes d4, bishop g4. Again, white has no time to act because now there's two pieces hitting the knight here. Only one defender. So knight g1, bishop takes e2, knight takes e2, and then just simply knight f2, winning a pawn and hitting the rook at the same time. And black had to white resigned. So after bishop f4, knight f6, e3, e6, we all know the ideas here. Bishop e2, d6, knight f3, bishop e7, h3, castle. Again, black is equalized. And now c3. And you'll see this set up a lot in these type, London system type games. Queen e8, queen b3, a5, knight bd2, and knight c6. Okay, maybe a4, right? Let's keep going. Bishop b5, bishop d7, knight g5, and bishop d8. Now Shipkov says knight d5 is better here. Definitely not as passive, I'll tell you that. But back to the game. Bishop d8, bishop c4, d5 practically forcing a stonewall. Bishop e2, and now a4. Alright. Queen d1 is dangerous. Can't take this pawn. Right, looks very trappy. And you can see where's the queen gonna run to. So a4, queen d1, knight e4, knight gf3, a3, queen c2, a takes, queen takes, knight a5, knight e5, big blunder right here. So knight takes d2, queen d2. Best white could do at this point is play king takes, but he plays queen and then loses after knight b3 because of the pin on the a2 pawn. Alright. Lesser players, but the play wasn't too bad. Remember this idea with bishop e7 and d6. So once again, we see with the white pieces of Vitalis Sapsis, who was 24-45 at the time, actually in 1988, going against Grandmaster Vladimir Maliniuk, who's 25-15. And here, after bishop f4, knight f6, e3, e6, bishop d3, and you see here Maliniuk plays knight c6. And the idea here again is to play d6 and then enforce the move e5. c3, d6, knight f3, and now queen e7. Again, more pressure on e5. So you have the knight on c6, very healthy square, queen on e7, and e5. So bishop b5, right? White wants to keep control of that square at all costs. Bishop d7, knight bd2, and now h6. All right. So black is gonna gain time on the bishop, playing g7, g5. All right. h3, g5, and so basically Maliniuk has gotten the best of both worlds. He's gotten to play the Dutch defense without losing the tempo. So in other words, usually in the Dutch, right, you have f5 is played, of course, then you play g6. Okay. However, he saved a clear tempo by just playing h6 and g5 because he's gaining time on the bishop, and then he could develop his bishop basically with the free move, which happens here. Bishop h2, bishop g7, queen e2, a6, bishop a4. White doesn't want to give the bishop up for nothing. Both players castle on the queen side. King b8, bishop b3, and then finally e5 after proper preparation. Maliniuk gets that in there. Gets that e5 advance in there, right? Okay. And Shipkov says black's chances are preferable thanks to his spatial advantage. Okay. On the king side, of course, and the bad position of the white dark square bishop. So now that bishop that was glorious at the beginning on f4, now, kind of out of place. D takes, knight c4. Of course, white is still fighting for this square. Knight e4, knight fd2. Knight c5 hitting the bishop. e4. And I think this move is a little sketchy because the dark square bishop is definitely going to be shut out the game now. After e4, knight takes b3, so there goes the bishop here, and then f4. And look at the dark square bishop on a2 on h2 now. f3, bishop e6, rook takes, rooks come off the board. b6, this prevents any c5 nonsense. King b7, bishop g1. So white is trying to reorganize, get that bishop back in the game. King c2, knight a7, bishop f6, and black is going to do the same thing, get his bishop, his dark square bishop in the game. Game continued. Okay, so black is victorious there as far as the battle of bishops, because if you look at the pawns, all of the black pawns are on dark squares, so black's bishop was the bad bishop in that equation, whereas white, his pawns are all on light squares, so his dark square bishop was actually the good bishop. However, Millennia did a good job in shutting down that bishop, you know, on h2, you know, so he really gave him no choice but to trade it off. All right, knight c3, knight c6, and king b2. And now it starts getting dangerous because of the deep infiltration of the black pieces. Knight db1, knight b4, check. And I think this is one of the most instructive games in the variation against for playing against f4. And now once that first pawn dropped, then position starts to deteriorate rapidly for white. And rest just without any comment here. And finally, after valiant effort, white resigned. Again, Millennia is about 100 points stronger. But again, the strategy from black, the patience, and this idea of knight c6, right? Instead of you know, playing d6 and then putting the knight on d7. This idea, this straightforward idea of knight c6, d6, queen e7, bishop d7, and then exploiting the fact that the bishop is on f4 with h6 and g5, along with the plan of castling queenside. Looks like a fantastic way to play against this system for black. So if I had to choose a system out of all these games, this would probably be my choice for black. All right, so we're almost done with the bishop f4 line, but we have to look at one more response for black. I already told you what I think is the best response for black, but we're gonna look at the last one nevertheless, which is g6. So after bishop f4, knight f6, e3, g6, right, going into Leningrad territory. We're looking at the game between a player named Michael Falloon and Grandmaster Vladimir Hort, who was 2600. So this is from the Havana Olympiad. So I'm not sure who Michael Falloon was. He might have just been like a master or something like that, not that strong. So I'm not gonna take the game that seriously, going against a player that was world class such as Hort. But anyway, white played bishop c4. Shipkov says that h4 is more active. Yeah. But bishop c4 was played. Bishop g7, knight d2, e6, castles, h4, knight c6, knight df3, knight e7, queen b3, a6, a4, B6, knight E5, king H8, queen D1, and bishop B7. And you know, black is just a comfortable position. Knight E3, D6, kicking the knight out. Knight D5, queen E8, protecting the pawn there on E6. Bishop A2, rook D8, queen B3, A5 castle, H6, kicking the knight out. Knight to E4, queen C2. And you have basically typical Dutch position, you know, stemming from the Leningrad formation. So black hasn't really done nothing to stop black's ideas. So it's natural that black eventually starts to take over. And eventually, being the weaker player, going blow for blow, the grandmaster is very hard. You know, positional maneuvering. White makes a blunder, plays knight D2. Thought he should have just played rook D1, but knight D2. So knight takes, queen takes, knight H5. All right, hitting the pawn on H4. Okay, bishop G3, and now guess what happens? E5. All right. And notice it's hard for white to take here because of the exposure of the queen. This move is also on the menu, and so the bishop gets embarrassed. So D5, bishop F6, bishop H2, because he can't you know, stop what's coming. So bishop H2, bishop takes H4. Now queen D1, bishop C8, G3, and he just kills his bishop on H2. Bishop F6, bishop C2, bishop G7, queen E2, knight F6, queen D3, queen F7, F3, and this queen D5. And that was it. Just you know, beat down. Like I said, Vladimir Hor is way too strong for this player, but I just want to show you some of the ideas of G6. Again, the plans combined, you know, D6, E5, you see the same things, but this is just coming from the Leningrad player's perspective. Somebody that would play the Leningrad. But just remember, if you play G6, you gotta be on the lookout for moves like H4. Okay, our next game in G6 variation between a player with the white pieces, Alexander Rabinovich, who's 24-13. And the black pieces, a master named Joost Berkvins, who's 22-68. So the E3, G6 was played, and white played H4. He went for it. H6. We discussed this earlier, how it's not necessary to play H6, but it can be you know, challenging after allowing H5 and knight takes H5, rook takes H5, etc. So he played H6, knight F3, and now D6. Typical Leningrad stuff. And you can see that knight C6 coming out, as we saw in the Melania game. A3, E6, queen E2, queen E7. So it's more about preparation. Bishop gets out of the way, bishop D7, and we see the same formation pretty much that we saw in the Melania game, which equalized effectively. D4. And then we just see the expansion on the queen side for black. Knight C4. Bishop C8, queen D2, and D5. Okay, and this just costs white a pawn, so I don't understand white's play here, but and play continued. Pieces were traded off. And I'm not going to continue this whole game, but black actually went on to win this game. And you can see, like, he has the upper hand already here. All right. So again, the most important thing to remember is this formation, right? Because remember, in the Millennium game, you saw H6 and G5, where since the bishop had still been on F4, black was able to gain a full tempi here. Here, white played a little bit better, but he still had this, pretty much the same formation, and then eventually, is allowed, if he wants to play the move E5 at some point. This is our last game in the bishop F4 line here, and should serve as like a warning for those that want to insist on playing G6. Again, it is playable, but this game is a little shows a little bit better play by white here. So this player was rated 2385, Mats Soyberg, versus Emmanuel Berg, who was also rated 2380. So both players around 2400. And so here we go. Emmanuel Berg is a grandmaster now, but at the time he probably was just international master in 1998. So bishop f4, knight f6, e3, g6, and here's the aggressive h4. h6 was played, and here white played knight c3, bishop g7, bishop f4. So just aggressive, get the pieces out in the classical form, classical style, and just outright direct attack. d6, and so now we can see I did again. d6 is play e5 at some point. Knight ge2, e6, queen d2, queen e7, now castle, a6, f3, b5, bishop b3, bishop b7, and now e4. Right, very important break. F takes, knight takes, knight takes, f takes, knight d7, rook h3, and knight f6. And now it is white who gets the e5 advancing, gaining more space. Knight e4, queen e3, d5, knight c3, a4 here, castles, queen d2, b takes a4, b takes a4, queen b4, rook a3, and now king h7, c3, queen e7, bishop c2. So maybe black should have went into that ending and got rid of those queens with his king side, kind of looking exposed over there. Those bishops, those black bishops look those white bishops look very intimidating. Black's bishops are just biting on granite. You can see the bishop on b7 is pretty bad, right where it is. And the bishop on g7 is just hitting on granite. But white's bishops on f4 and c2, those are very intimidating. Queen takes h4. And again, like I said earlier, when it comes to opposite wing attacks, the pawns are of less value, right? It's more about getting the initiative. So white has no problem giving up this h pawn, because now the h file is open. Look at this. And it causes them to make more compromises here. And you can see right here with this pin that white is threatening to capture this pawn here. Therefore, king g8, queen h3. No reason to offer trade of queens here. Let queen g1. All right. Anyway, they go into this ending. g5, giving up a pawn for really no good reason, but to try to be active. f8, and now bishop f4, cutting the coordination of the rooks. Bishop h6, Bishop d3 takes, check. And more pawns drop, and eventually white go on and win this game. In the end, it's double-edged game, but white is better, and you can see now black is gonna pay for having those pawns on the same colors as his bishop. Very strong play right here. As you can see, his little tactic here. He's gonna win the c pawn, and of course, if the c pawn captures on d5, the bishop is gonna fall. Again, that's the downside of having the pawns on the same color as your bishop. Alright, it's these type of endings like that. So black resigned, and that's gonna do it for this video. This is just the beginning. Like I said, we just discussed the bishop f4 lines. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, you know, leave in the comment box below. But do me a favor, please hit the thumbs up video, and I also check the links below. I'll put DVDs related to this opening, you know, this Dutch system, whether it's Leningrad, Stonewall, books and DVDs related to that. And please consider supporting the channel. In our next video, we'll be looking at another offbeat move in queen d3.